Hello there, I'm Henry Keane, and this is News Pulse, the beating heart of the news from Ukraine and for the world. It turned out to be more difficult than expected. US President Donald Trump admitted that negotiations on a peaceful settlement of Russia's all-out war against Ukraine in particular, and democracy in general, actually, are not going so smoothly. This is reported by the Wall Street Journal, citing Trump's closest aides. At the same time, the American leader said that he is ready to meet with the Kremlin dictator, Vladimir Putin. Most likely, this will happen after a trip to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates in mid-May. Well, my colleagues will talk you through the topic.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has emphasized that it is Russia that must stop the war in Ukraine. During his visit to South Africa, he stated that Ukraine is fulfilling all proposals from its partners, except those that contradict its constitution and laws. Zelensky added that Ukraine needs security guarantees, stronger pressure on Russia, and tougher sanctions against the aggressor state.
Without emotion or blame, we say directly, we believe that greater pressure on Russia can bring us closer to a complete ceasefire. That is step number one. Trump and the US have said that if either side refuses a full ceasefire and other steps toward ending the war, there will be strong measures, including sanctions.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump believes that a peace agreement with Russia has been reached, and that the next move lies with Kiev. Earlier, Western media reported that the U.S. had allegedly proposed recognizing the annexation of Crimea by Russia as part of a peace deal. These ideas were reportedly included in a document presented by senior White House officials to Ukrainian and European representatives in Paris on April 17th. However, during a press conference, Trump declined to answer directly whether the U.S. supports recognizing Crimea as Russian territory as part of a peace settlement.
I just want to see the war end. I don't care. If they're both happy, they both sign an agreement. I have no favorites. I don't want to have any favorites. I want to have a deal done.
In response, President Zelensky reminded the public about the Crimea Declaration, adopted by Trump's first administration in 2018, which stated that the United States refuses to recognize claims over territories seized by force in violation of international law. Lithuanian Foreign Minister Kęstutis Budrys also reiterated that there can be no discussion over Crimea's status. He emphasized that, under international law, the peninsula, temporarily occupied by Russia, remains an integral part of Ukraine.
By questioning the principles of international law, by questioning the issue of Crimea's status, we are opening a hell from which devils will crawl out that no one will contain, and this will mean that the US influence and ability to set certain rules, which derive from its enormous hyperpower, will be dramatically diminished. Kęstutis Budrys, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, in an interview with LRT.
Another reported proposal from the White House, according to Western officials, involves granting neutral status to the territory surrounding the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and placing it under U.S. control. President Zelensky clarified that Ukraine has not received any official proposals from the United States regarding the management of the plant. However, he said that if Russia withdraws and the U.S. offers cooperation, Ukraine would be open to partnership, but only with clear security guarantees for personnel, access to infrastructure, water, and housing.
The Zaporizhzhia plant isn't operating right now, and without Ukraine it won't. And with all due respect, the US alone won't be enough. We need our technical staff. If the plant is under Russian control today and under American control tomorrow, what happens to the people? If the Americans are with us, the Russians leave, and we restore it together and make money from electricity. I think that's fair, but I've never heard anything official. I've heard many messages, but nothing formal.
Amid ongoing peace discussions, Russian forces continue to relentlessly bomb Ukraine. On the night of April 24th, according to Ukraine's Air Force, Russia launched 215 missiles and drones of various types, with the main attack targeting Kiev. Western leaders condemned the overnight assault. French President Emmanuel Macron urged the international community not to forget who bears responsibility for the war. He stressed that U.S. outrage should be directed solely at Putin. Donald Trump also expressed dissatisfaction with the Russian strikes on Ukraine's capital and called on the Kremlin's leader to stop. Reported by Victoria Smirnova, UATV News.
To stay safe, the Netherlands needs to arm itself to the teeth. This was stated by King William Alexander after a meeting with representatives of the country's defense companies. The issue of increasing military budgets is also being raised in Canada, Poland, and directly in NATO as general. Andriy Dmytrenko will tell us in more detail how exactly Kyiv's partners are going to respond to Russian threat.
Europe and Canada must make a quantum leap in defense spending to ensure their security in the coming years. This is one of the key points in NATO's 2024 annual report, prepared by Secretary General Mark Rutte. The document highlights that defense investments by alliance members have increased by almost 20% compared to 2023. However, Rutte also notes that alongside rising defense budgets, the threats facing NATO have also grown.
2024 saw growing strategic alignment and practical cooperation between Russia, the People's Republic of China, Iran and Democratic People's Republic of Korea, including through deployment of thousands of North Korean troops to Europe. In 2025, we need to significantly increase our efforts to ensure NATO remains a key source of military advantage for all our nations. Our continued freedom and prosperity depend on it. From NATO's 2024 annual report.
At the same time, contributions from European countries and Canada currently cover only 36% of NATO's collective budget, and just 22 out of 32 NATO members meet the requirement to spend at least 2% of GDP on defense. U.S. President Donald Trump has repeatedly called for a more balanced burden sharing between the U.S. and Europe. On April 24th, Mark Rutte arrived in the United States for meetings with the President, the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of Defense. Rutte expressed agreement with Trump's position and stated that NATO leadership is considering an increase in the required defense spending targets.
But clearly with 2% we cannot defend NATO territory. It has to be considerably higher. And I've said before, it has to be considerably north of 3%. And this is based not on an assumption, but based on careful planning. We know exactly which capabilities we need to reach. We know the gaps there are to keep NATO territory safe.
The issue of increasing defense budgets has also come to the forefront in Canada. During the current election campaign, both major parties, the Conservatives and the Liberals, have promised to raise defense spending if elected. The current Prime Minister, Mark Carney, representing the Liberal Party, has emphasized the growing Russian and Chinese threats from the north. As part of a modernization program for the Canadian Armed Forces, he has pledged to strengthen defense cooperation with Europe.
To secure our nation over the long term, we have to do much more. We need to rebuild, rearm, and reinvest in the Canadian Armed Forces. So we will boost our Made in Canada defense industry, including by joining Rearm Europe, to invest in transatlantic security with like-minded European partners.
Calls to boost defense capabilities are also coming from the Netherlands. After meeting with representatives of the country's defense industry, King Willem-Alexander stated that Amsterdam had for too long taken peace for granted and had not paid enough attention to its security. According to NATO's 2024 report, the Netherlands allocated just over 2% of its GDP to defense spending. The war in Ukraine, the king said, has shown that the Netherlands must be much more engaged.
We must be prepared and armed to the teeth to guarantee that we can continue living in peace and security. The industry I visited today must be able to resume production in case of conflict. If you are not ready for that, you may not be able to cope when the time comes.
Meanwhile, Poland, the EU's leader in defense spending, plans to maintain its pace of investment in its defense industry. Finance Minister Andrzej Domański announced that Warsaw would appeal to the European Commission to lift the 3% budget deficit limit for defense expenditures. According to the minister, this move would help EU countries meet the goals of the Rearm Europe project, which aims to invest €650 billion in defense over the next 4 years. Reported by Andriy Dmytrenko, UATV News.
Factories in China are slowing production and sending some workers on unpaid leave even, the Financial Times reports. The reason for the reduction in orders for Chinese products is, of course, the trade war unleashed by US President Donald Trump, who imposed staggering 145% tariffs on China. Beijing, in turn, imposed retaliatory tariffs of 125%. Well, today, the White House is actively discussing the possibility of sealing a trade deal with China to ease tensions between the countries. The tensions the Trump administration created, actually. Well, learn more details with Yulia Granovska report.
Donald Trump's tariffs have already taken a toll on China. Due to the newly imposed 145% duties, American customers are suspending their orders, and Chinese factories are scaling back production, according to the Financial Times.
Workers say the trade war has halted production for a week or more at factories producing everything from shoe soles to jeans, electric sockets and portable stoves. Some factory owners have cut overtime and weekend shifts, writes the Financial Times publication.
In response, China has blocked the delivery of new aircraft to the American company Boeing. As a result, Boeing is now reselling planes originally built for Chinese carriers to Indian buyers. At the end of last month, the company delivered 41 Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg noted that, for now, the situation remains manageable.
Ortberg conceded that the turnaround underway at Boeing could become rocky if more nations were to follow suit. "I don't think a day goes by where we aren't engaged with someone in the administration, including cabinets, secretaries and up to POTUS himself," writes the Bloomberg publication.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is considering revising the tariffs. However, Donald Trump stated that a full rollback is not on the table.
This country is not going to be losing money on trade anymore. We were losing $2 trillion a year on trade. Now we're going to be making money, a lot of money. So that's very good. Every country wants to partake, even countries that have ripped us off for many, many years. China is an example, but it's not just China. European Union, they ripped us off for many, many years, and those days are over. We're going to make a lot of money for our people. We'll be able to lower taxes substantially, and we're going to be proud of ourselves. They're not going to be a laughing stock that got taken advantage of by virtually every country in the world.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent emphasized that for any major deal with the U.S., China must rebalance its economy and make changes.
Recent data shows the Chinese economy tilting even further away from consumption toward manufacturing. China's economic system, with growth driven by manufacturing exports, will continue to create even more serious imbalances with its trading partners if the status quo is allowed to continue. China's current economic model is built on exporting its way out of its economic troubles. It's an unsustainable model that is not only harming China, but the entire world.
On April 2nd, President Trump launched a sweeping trade war affecting over 180 countries. Most saw tariffs ranging from 10% to 54%, but for China, the rate was set at 145%. In response, China imposed symmetrical tariffs on U.S. goods, up to 125%. The White House then threatened to raise China's tariff rate even further, up to 245%, and called for negotiations. According to the Wall Street Journal, Washington is now considering lowering tariffs on Chinese imports to between 50% and 65% in an effort to ease tensions. Nevertheless, President Trump said the current 145% tariff would remain in place until an agreement is reached.
No, I haven't brought it down. I haven't brought it still 145. I haven't brought it down. I said it's a high tariff. It is a high tariff, but I haven't brought it down. It basically means China's not doing any business with us, essentially, because it's a very high number. But we get along. I get along very well with President Xi, and I hope we can make a deal. Otherwise, we'll set a price, and hopefully they'll come here and they'll contribute.
However, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has stated that no consultations or negotiations over tariffs have taken place between Beijing and Washington.
This is fake news. As far as we know, China and the US have not held consultations or negotiations on tariffs, let alone reached any agreement. This trade war was initiated by the United States. China's position remains consistent and clear. If you want to fight, we'll fight to the end. If you want to talk, the door is open. If the US genuinely wants a negotiated solution, it must stop threatening and pressuring China, and instead engage in dialogue based on equality, mutual respect and shared benefit.
The spokesperson added that Washington's strategy, demanding a deal while simultaneously ramping up pressure, simply won't work. Reported by Yulia Hranovska, UATV News.
It was Henry Keenan, News Pulse. Goodbye and see you at the next beat.